The Ghost of Gettysburg, a true paranormal encounter. I've always had an interest in history, especially the kind that lingers. The kind that doesn't just sit in books, but clings to the ground, the air, the walls of old buildings. Maybe that's why, when my friend Dean invited me to join him and a small group of amateur paranormal investigators on a weekend trip to Gettysburg, I didn't think twice. I wasn't a ghost hunter, not by a long shot. But Gettysburg, well, it isn't like most historic places. It's different. More than 50,000 men died in 3 days during the Battle of Gettysburg. Some were torn apart by cannon fire. Others were stabbed, shot, or beaten to death in hand-to-hand combat. They say the ground soaked up every drop of blood, every scream, every prayer, and it never really let go. That kind of violence doesn't fade. It echoes. We got there just before sunset. The sky was turning gold and gray, and the fields stretched endlessly in every direction. Rolling hills, stone walls, bronze statues of long-dead generals riding horses that looked frozen mid-charge. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. There's a quiet in Gettysburg, yes, but not a natural one. Not the kind you'd find on a calm autumn evening in the country. It's heavy. It presses on your chest. It makes you feel like you're being held in place, like the land itself is watching. We set up base near the Devil's Den, a rocky hill where some of the most vicious fighting happened. Soldiers were shot point blank, their bodies tumbling down the stones like rag dolls. The boulders are still staying in places, though the park rangers don't talk about that. We were armed with the usual stuff: EMF detectors, digital audio recorders, thermal imaging cameras, and a couple of handheld night vision scopes. Dean had a spirit box, too. I didn't put much stock in the gear, but it wasn't about belief. It was about documenting, observing, listening. At first, nothing happened. A few spikes on the EMF meter here and there, which Dean shrugged off as false readings from nearby electronics or buried wires. Someone joked that the ghosts were camera shy, but there was something in the air, something you couldn't laugh off. The mist started to roll in around 8:30. It didn't come in thick, like in the movies. It moved low across the field, creeping along the ground like it was alive. It pulled around the base of the rocks and crawled up the edges, turning them into jagged silhouettes that looked less like stones and more like bones. Shattered bones. I was the first to notice how quiet it had gotten. No crickets, no birds. Even the wind had died. And I mean completely. We followed a path leading to the wheat field, another hotbed of chaos during the battle. More than 6,000 men died there in a single day, some of them caught in crossfire from both sides. It was a killing ground then, and maybe still now. We paused at a fence line, and that's when it started. Ty, one of the guys in our group, played back a section of audio he'd just recorded. At first it was nothing, just some static, but then, faint and low, we heard it. A voice. A man's voice. It was whispering. Gravelly. Breathless. You couldn't make out the words. But it was there. None of us had said a word while that clip was recorded. And we weren't near any houses or radios. Just open field. Dean tried to brush it off. Radio interference. Maybe. Could have been a walkie signal, he said. But he didn't sound convinced. About 20 minutes later, we were nearing the woods that border the peach orchard. Another brutal sight. It said some soldiers who were wounded dragged themselves into the trees to die in peace. Some say their souls never made it out. We were walking single file when Ty suddenly stopped. Just froze. Dean asked what was wrong, but Ty didn't respond at first. He just held up his hand. Then, in a whisper, he said, "You hear that?" We all went silent. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then it came, faint but distinct, a steady, rhythmic sound. Thump, 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 like boots, heavy ones, walking through thick mud. It was coming from the woods. We pointed our flashlights, but the beams barely penetrated the fog between the trees. Nothing moved. No eyes. No animals. No wind. Just that sound getting louder. Then it stopped. Dean took a step forward, opened his mouth to say something, and just froze. His eyes locked onto something behind me, wide, unblinking. I turned around slowly, And there, on the ridge maybe 30 feet behind us, stood a man. He wasn't solid, not entirely, more like a shadow given shape. But he was there. I could see the outline of a uniform, the long coat, the kepi-style hat, the way he stood, arms straight, heels together, shoulders back, like he was standing at attention, watching us. The moment I blinked, he was gone, not disappeared gradually, just gone, like a bad cut in an old film reel. None of us spoke for a while after that. We just stood there listening, hoping it wouldn't happen again. But part of me thinks we all wanted it to. We needed to confirm it was real. Eventually, Dean broke the silence. I think we've seen enough for tonight. No one argued. We packed up slowly, walking back the way we came, still casting glances over our shoulders. But nothing followed us. Nothing we could see. Anyway, when we got back to the car, the mood was quiet, tense. Everyone was playing the tough guy act, but you could feel the fear underneath. Dean was unusually quiet. Ty kept checking the woods behind us. Later that night, back at the motel, we reviewed the audio again. That same whisper came back. 3 more times. Faint, distorted, but present. Always a male voice. In one of the clips, we finally caught a word. Advance. That was it. Just one word. Whispered like an order, like someone reliving their final command, stuck in some endless, looping moment from 1863. We didn't go back out the next night. I still don't know what we saw or heard. Maybe it was just the fog, the darkness, the power of suggestion. Maybe we scared ourselves. But I don't think so. I've been to plenty of historic sites. I've read the books, walked the fields. Gettysburg is different. The weight of what happened there. It's still hanging in the air, like smoke from a fire that refuses to die out. Something remains. Something remembers. And sometimes, if you listen closely, it speaks. This one didn't come from a tourist, a local, or a thrill-seeking ghost hunter. It came from a man who's made Gettysburg his second home. A park ranger. Someone who walks the battlefield day after day, season after season. Someone who's memorized every trail and statue, who can quote the plaques from memory. A man who doesn't scare easy. I met him during a quiet visit to the Gettysburg National Military Park. It was early spring. Overcast skies, bare trees still clutching the last chill of winter. We struck up a conversation outside the visitor center while I was waiting for a tour to start. He was older, maybe in his late 50s. Gray mustache, calm voice. He didn't volunteer much at first, but something about the weather or the emptiness of the park that day must have loosened something. He asked if I believed in ghosts. I told him I wasn't sure, but that I was open to it. He nodded like that was enough. Then, after glancing around to make sure no one was close by, he leaned in a bit and said, "I don't tell this one to tourists, but I think someone should hear it. It happened a few years ago," he said, around mid-October. The park was beginning to wind down for the season, and most of the visitors had gone home for the day. He'd just finished closing up the visitor center, nothing out of the ordinary, and decided to take a short detour before heading home. Cemetery Ridge was one of his favorite spots. Peaceful, historical. He said he liked to go up there sometimes to clear his head before the long drive back. He'd done it dozens of times, sometimes alone, sometimes with co-workers. Never a problem. That night was cool and still. No wind, the kind of quiet that almost rings in your ears. He drove slowly, headlights casting long shadows through the trees. The monument stood like ghosts themselves, tall, unmoving, watching. He parked at a small turnout near the angle, where Pickett's charge reached its bloody conclusion. The field stretched out in front of him, empty and vast under the darkening sky. That's when he heard it. At first, he thought it might have been the radio, but it was off. Drums. Distant. Soft. A steady, rhythmic pattern. Dum, 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 dum. The kind of cadence you'd hear from a marching unit. Not fast, not chaotic. Purposeful. Disciplined. Like a company was on the move. He rolled down his window. The sound grew louder. Not sharply, more like it was rising from underneath him, not from any particular direction. Not left, not right, not ahead or behind. Just there, as if the ground itself was remembering something. His instincts as a ranger kicked in. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the vehicle, more curious than afraid. He figured maybe there was an event going on he hadn't heard about. A reenactment rehearsal, maybe, or some teenagers playing around with a speaker in the woods. But then he saw them. He said they were faint at first, just shapes in the mist rising across the field. Silhouettes, almost. But the more he looked, the clearer they became. Dozens of them, soldiers, rows of them, marching slowly, in perfect formation, not modern uniforms. These were faded, dusty blue Union coats, tall kepi hats, cartridge belts slung across their chests. He said their faces were pale, not glowing or translucent, just drained, like candle wax. Their expressions were blank, focused, their eyes staring forward like they didn't even see him standing there. Not angry, not sad, just determined. And they made no sound, no voices, no breathing, no rustling of gear or weapons, just the drums. Steady, measured, as if they were being called somewhere, as if they'd never stopped marching. He said he couldn't move, not out of fear, but because something about the moment felt sacred, like stepping between worlds, watching two realities overlap for just a few heartbeats. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, they began to fade. One by one, the soldiers vanished into the mist, their outlines dissolving like smoke. The drum softened, slowed, and then stopped completely. He stood there for a while after that, staring out into the emptiness of the field, the silence even heavier than before. The temperature had dropped noticeably. His breath hung in the air. When he finally got back into the vehicle, he didn't feel afraid, just humbled, like he'd witnessed something ancient, something real. He told me he didn't report it, didn't write it down. He said he knew what it sounded like, crazy or worse, made up. He'd heard every ghost story Gettysburg had to offer. He'd even had people ask if he'd ever seen anything. He always said no, until that day with me. I think it was real, he said quietly. Or if it wasn't, then I don't want to know what it was. What struck me most wasn't the story itself. It was the way he told it. Calm, measured, not trying to convince me of anything, just recounting it like someone describing a memory they still haven't quite figured out. And it stayed with me, long after I left the park, long after the trip ended. Every time I think about Gettysburg, I think about that ranger, about the way he looked over the field while he spoke, as if half expecting the soldiers to return again. There's something about Gettysburg that defies explanation. It's not just the death toll, though that number alone is staggering. It's not just the stories, the photographs, the history books. It's the weight of it all, the feeling. When you walk those fields, you don't just learn about the past, you feel it, like it's folded into the ground beneath your feet. Like the trees, the rocks, and the soil remember what happened, and aren't quite done with it. Some people visit and feel nothing, just a deep respect for history. Others hear footsteps when no one's there, see lantern lights moving in the woods, catch glimpses of blue or gray in the distance, only for it to vanish the moment they blink. And sometimes, when the night is just right, and the fog curls across the hills like breath from sleeping giants, you hear the drums. This one happened to me. I've always been interested in history, especially the kind that comes with scars. Places where tragedy didn't just happen, but left a mark so deep that it still lingers. That's part of what drew me to Gettysburg. Everyone knows the name, even if they don't know the details. Over 50,000 casualties. 3 days of unimaginable bloodshed. Some call it the turning point of the Civil War. Others call it one of the most haunted places in America. Before I visited, I did what any history nerd does. I read. One name that kept coming up was Jennie Wade. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even in the military. She was a 20-year-old woman baking bread for Union soldiers when a stray Confederate bullet tore through her door and killed her instantly. She died kneading dough, just trying to help. She was the only civilian killed during the entire battle. Her house still stands and has since been turned into a museum. It's modest, brick, tucked into a quiet street not far from the main roads of Gettysburg. By all appearances, it's just another preserved piece of history. But the stories, they say something else. Locals and tour guides talk about cold spots, voices, furniture moving, people hearing their names whispered in empty rooms. Some refuse to go inside at all. But the most consistent claims come from the basement. People say they feel ill down there, lightheaded, dizzy. Some say they feel like they're being watched. A few have even passed out. Naturally, I had to see it for myself. I joined a daytime historical tour. Nothing spooky, at least that's what I told myself. Just a chance to walk through an important part of American history. The guide walked us through the upstairs rooms first. We saw the kitchen where Jennie had been baking. We saw the hole in the door where the bullet entered. Even now, it's still visible, an inch or two wide, warped around the edges from impact. A quiet, brutal reminder. Everything upstairs felt solemn, but not scary, like a museum should. Then came the basement. We were told to be cautious on the stairs. Steep, narrow steps leading down into the shadowy stone chamber below. I decided to go last, partly to let everyone else pass, partly because I wanted a moment alone. I figured it would give me space to really take in the atmosphere. Big mistake. As soon as I stepped down, I felt it, a tightness in my chest. Not pain, not panic, just pressure, like the air itself had turned thick. It settled around my lungs and didn't let up. I remember stopping on the bottom step and gripping the railing, trying to catch my breath. I told myself it was claustrophobia. Too many people in a small space. Not enough oxygen. Simple science. But I've been in basements before. Worse ones. This was different. The temperature was noticeably colder down there. Not just cooler like a shaded cellar, but cold, sharp, like standing in front of an open freezer. The rest of the group moved on with the guide, listening to a story about how the family had sheltered there while bullets tore through the town above. That's when it started. My phone vibrated in my pocket. At first, I ignored it, thought maybe I'd forgotten to silence it. But then I remembered I had put it on airplane mode before the tour started. I always do that in museums. No distractions. No accidental notifications. Still, it vibrated again. And again, I pulled it out. The screen was black. No caller ID. No number. Just a blank screen with a flickering green call icon. It shouldn't have been possible. I stared at it, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. Against my better judgment, I answered. What I heard still gives me chills. It wasn't a voice, not at first. Just a low hum. Static, like tuning into a dead radio channel. Then something under it, a whisper, so faint I could barely hear it. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. There was breathing, not mine, not mechanical, human. And then, in the middle of the static, a single phrase broke through, garbled, cracked, but unmistakable. Don't go upstairs. I froze. Everything in me said to drop the phone and run. But I couldn't move. I was stuck on that basement floor, the cold air clinging to me like wet clothes. My eyes darted to the top of the stairs, half expecting to see someone or something standing there waiting. I snapped out of it and bolted. I don't even remember pushing past the others. I just remember sprinting up the stairs two at a time, heart pounding, lungs screaming. When I reached the top, I leaned against the nearest wall, phone still in my hand. The call had ended. I checked my logs. There was nothing. No missed call, no incoming call, no voicemail, no record of anything. The rest of the tour passed in a blur. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. How do you tell a group of strangers you just got a call from a ghost? I was still trying to convince myself it hadn't happened, that it was just a glitch, a fluke, a tech error. But I know what I heard. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times. That whisper, that static, that chilling sentence. Don't go upstairs. What did it mean? Was it a warning? A mistake? A replay of something spoken long ago? Or was it meant specifically for me? I don't know. I probably never will. But I haven't gone back to the Jennie Wade House since, and I'm not sure I ever will. Some people say ghosts aren't real, that what we call paranormal is just stress, old pipes, the mind playing tricks. But sometimes you just know when something isn't right. You feel it in your gut, in your bones. That basement, something's wrong with it. There's a weight in that space, like time itself folded in on that room and trapped something there. Maybe it's Jennie. Maybe it's something else. All I know is I heard a voice that wasn't supposed to exist on a phone that shouldn't have been ringing in a room no one wants to stay in for long. Believe me or don't. But if you ever find yourself in Gettysburg and you decide to visit the Jennie Wade House, just be careful in the basement. And maybe, just maybe, leave your phone off. If you've ever visited Gettysburg or experienced anything strange like this, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoy true unsettling encounters like this one, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried.